Welcome to the award-winning show, Holding Down the Fort by U.S. Vet Wealth.
We returned for season 6 to answer the biggest question for career military families. So when are we going to get out? And everything involved with answering this question.
I'm Jen Amos, creator and co-host of Holding Down the Fort and a Gold Star family member and veteran spouse.
And I'm Jenny Lynn Stroop, co-host and chief shower-upper here on Holding Down the Fort.
Together, we will converse with special guests from and for our military community to share knowledge and resources and relevant stories on how we can best hold down the fort while on active duty, going through transition, and into post-military life.
Now, let's get into the show.
Risking is always better than regretting. A quote by Amy Forsythe. Amy Forsythe attended an all-girls Catholic high school, wearing a uniform and doing what nuns told her to do. It turns out that the military is not that much different. Today, Amy is an award-winning military journalist, a public affairs officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve, and the author of Heroes Live Here, a tribute to Camp Pendleton Marines Since 9/11. She credits the partnerships that made her book possible, shares what inspired her to join the Marines 30 years ago, how she eventually balanced being in the reserves and civilian life, the importance of recruiting top talent, women in the military, and much more. Amy, it was such a pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much again for joining us. And with that said, I also want to take this opportunity to share some announcements. First and foremost, the week that this episode is being published, Jenny Lynn and I are so excited to be traveling to Disney World to attend Disney Institute's Veterans Institute Summit on August 19th to the 20th. The Veterans Institute Summit is a complimentary event created to inspire business professionals and organizations utilizing actionable insights from the Walt Disney Company's Heroes Work Here initiative. Created to hire, train, and support military veterans and military spouses, Heroes Work Here has resulted in more than 10,000 veterans joining the Walt Disney Company since its launch in 2012. The Veterans Institute Summit is intended to help companies and organizations learn how to build or improve effective veteran hiring initiatives of their own. The summit will include advice and insights from veterans service organizations, first-hand perspectives shared by veterans about their transition to the civilian workforce, and best practices from organizations that have created their own successful programs delivered through keynote presentations, panel discussions, and Disney Institute content. As of right now, the Veterans Institute Summit is intended for organizations seeking corporate best practices to recruit, hire, support, and retain veterans and military spouses. And you're probably wondering, Jen, why didn't you tell me this a long time ago? Well, the Veterans Institute Summit was an invite-only event. However, registration is open for individuals who want to attend online via live stream. I will provide that in the show notes for you in case you're interested. The reason why I'm sharing this is because I have the honor to be moderating their military spouse employment panel. We've had a lot of talks about this, and I'll probably mention this in an upcoming episode after Jenny Lynn and I return from our trip. But the Disney team had realized that although they are really good with veteran employment, they were humble enough to admit to themselves that they know very little about military spouse employment. So they had decided to reach out to experts, including myself, as someone to moderate a panel such as the military spouse employment. Let me read a quick description on what this panel is going to be about. Studies show service member spouses tend to experience unemployment and underemployment at a significantly higher rate than their peers. Begin to think differently about the appearance of resume experience gaps, frequent job changes, and other relevant topics. One thing I thought I would share is that the Disney team had decided to bring me on as their only non-Disney facilitator to moderate one of these panels because of our show here, Holding Down the Fort by U.S. Vet Wealth. So this is really a manifestation of all of the work Jenny Lynn and I and you, the guest and the listener, have put forth for this show to be possible. For an organization such as the Disney's Institute to have seen value in the work that we do here and invite me as their only non-Disney employee moderator to moderate this panel. So Thank you, Disney. Really, really appreciate you listening to my podcast. I don't know how you found us, but I'm sure I'm glad that you did. And Jenny Lynn and I are extremely excited to be attending this the week that this episode is coming out. I'm really excited to announce who is going to be on this military spouse employment panel. We have Cheryl Mason, who is the Executive Director for Veterans and Military Spouse Employment Programs at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The second panelist is Tish Stropes, who is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the Fisher House Foundation. And last but not least, a dear friend of Scott and mine, Stephanie Brown, the founder and CEO of the Rosie Network. I can't even find the words humbled. I think humbled is not even a big enough word to have this opportunity to be recognized by the Disney Institute for our work here at Holding Down the Fort, by US Vet Wealth, to moderate this panel with incredible influential people in our military spouse community. So once again, if you want to register for the live stream, or you just want to learn more and check out the speaker lineup, I will go ahead and provide that in the show notes. So all exciting stuff. Wish us the best. We had a virtual rehearsal last week talking with Tish and Stephanie and Cheryl about how, what we want to bring forth for this panel. And I got to tell you, it's going to be a good one. So with that said, thank you all for listening to our announcements. Now, please enjoy this conversation with Amy Forsythe. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the award-winning podcast show, Holding Down the Fort. I am your creator, co-host, and as of late, I've decided to pick on a third title that starts with a C, first-time cat mom. And as always, I have my co-host with me, who is a seasoned military spouse, mom of two, and mental health advocate, Jenny Lynn Stroop. Jenny Lynn, welcome back.
Hey, glad to be here today.
Yes, I'm also liking our titles. Like my titles, I'll start with C's, yours starts with M's. I know this is something we established, I think 2 episodes ago.
I know, we're very matchy-matchy, all that alliteration.
Yes. We're pretty excited because I have been reading up on this guest in the recent weeks and just really excited to be speaking with her today. I also want to make sure I try to be as journalistic as possible because this person we're bringing on today is an award-winning military journalist. She currently serves as a PAO in the U.S. Navy Reserve. And in case you don't know what that is, that's Public Affairs Officer. And she's the author of the upcoming book, Heroes Live Here, a tribute to Camp Pendleton Marines since 9/11. Without further ado, we have Amy Forsythe with us. Amy Forsythe, welcome to Holding Down the Fort.
I am so thrilled to be with you ladies today. Thank you so much for having me.
Amy, it's a pleasure having you on. Let's go ahead and open up about how you have recently been featured in NBC 7 San Diego's channel for your book, Heroes Live Here. And I want to open up by talking about this because as a Gold Star family member myself, I really appreciate how you have taken the time to honor our fallen heroes by being able to showcase the memorials and markers on Camp Pendleton. And a lot of these memorials and markers, Amy, are not available to the public. You've been able to go in Camp Pendleton to be able to document these for your book. So let's open up and talk a little bit about why this was so important for you to do, for our fallen heroes.
Well, thank you so much. This book project really wrote itself, and I'm really proud to partner with other Marines who have strong ties to the base. But the book chronicles some of the memorials from those Marines who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and their legacy, and whether it was a cross up on the hill or a stone etched with their name or some sort of tribute that was brought back from Iraq or Afghanistan. Many people don't know what the legacy is of those warriors through that era. And so it was just so important for people who don't have access to come on to Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, located in North San Diego County. The book can showcase that and read those stories about those heroes. I just wanted to make sure that people know, and for those Gold Star families, that we remember, we honor their legacy and the tributes to them. And many of them were personal stories for me, and I had served with many of them. And so people I knew, I just didn't want that memory to fade away. And so putting it together in a kind of a coffee table book filled with a lot of pictures because I know Marines like pictures. So it was just a nice, colorful tribute and making sure that their names are captured in those stories and connections are fresh in our memory and our hearts.
Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit about how some of this is personal for you. I know that there is a special memorial called the McClung Ridge in honor of Major Megan McClung. Tell us a little bit about what that means for you and also for her family to have a dedicated stone on her behalf.
Well, it was a wonderful tribute. Just a few months ago, I was able to bring Megan McClung's mother up to this ridge line on Camp Pendleton to show her for the first time how we honored Megan. At the end of our deployment, we came home and we put a rock on this hill where we all used to run. But for those who don't know, Megan McClung was a Marine Corps major who died in Iraq in December 2006. Her Humvee was hit by an IED. She was killed immediately along with 2 other soldiers. But she and I had deployed together and served for many years together on and off and crossed paths. So when we were deployed in Anbar province in Fallujah and Ramadi, Iraq, things were at its worst. And we just never expected that her, as a public affairs officer, she was the first Marine officer to be killed. She was a graduate of U.S. Naval Academy, a triathlete, just this uber runner. People knew her for her physical capabilities. And so it just really came as a big shock to everyone at that deployment towards the end of a very long year, very difficult, emotional year. So when we came home, we put a rock on top of this ridge line, and her mother and her brother came to visit it with me this year. So being able to share that with them was really special and just keeping her memory alive. And if we could all do that with those that we've served with before, or just passing on and inspiring patriotism and honoring that legacy for all those that we've lost, especially during the past 20 years, I think we could serve our nation well, and especially those currently serving and those coming up through the ranks or thinking of joining the military, is that this is a sacred commitment that we make to those that we serve with.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate just humanizing the entire military experience. It's like, often when you think about media, like I've recently been watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how they glorify what it means to serve, Captain America, for example. And yet the reality is that the consequence of it could be Gold Star family members. It could be, these types of situations. And so to be able to just honor that, I think is very special. And I appreciate you doing that. Jenny Lynn, considering how you and Matthew were formerly stationed in San Diego, I'm curious if you ever had a chance to go to Camp Pendleton.
I have been to Camp Pendleton some for work. I have never done a memorial tour. I've done a real general, like, this is a giant base here where you can find a couple things like the exchange and the gas station and, a few other high points on the base. But I am unfamiliar with most of the things Amy touches in her book, which is why I'm really glad that it's out there. Because, even as someone who has access to military bases, there are things like that you just pass by every day that unless you knew it was there, it's just there. Who's going to spot a rock on top of to be clear, Pendleton is huge and very rocky and very mountainous. And to know that there's, something up there honoring somebody is different than just driving around the base.
Yeah. It was wonderful to be able to partner with a graphic designer, a Marine veteran, and we built a map to show some of these locations and made those connections in the book. So that's what's really special, and a few contributions from other Marines who wrote vignettes in the book to help share their experiences. And so it's really just a partnered project that shared with a few other people that have strong ties to the base. And what I learned in my research, though, is that more Marines from Camp Pendleton than any other base or station in the country had suffered great consequences as those who made the ultimate sacrifice from that one base and a constant rotation of deployments through Iraq and Afghanistan throughout the 20 years. And so it was just a really special place filled with those memorials that we might have taken 10 or 15 years to erect and put together, but they're there, and there's more still, tributes coming through the years. And this year marks the 80th anniversary of the base. And so there's a lot of history there, even through World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and then of this generation. So it's just interesting research. And the base spans 125,000 square acres along the Southern California coast. That beachfront property is priceless right now in between Orange County and San Diego County, but know that it's a national treasure and really it's sort of a national monument. If you monuments on a monument, but it's a protected for environmental reasons and just a really interesting protected place with, and also rich in California history. So long before it was a military base, there was the California history of when California was under the rule of Spain and, just the development. It was a working cattle ranch, a sprawling working cattle ranch before that. And so some of the old structures, one or two old structures on the base that the Marine Corps has preserved, this old adobe home that was connected to the California mission systems. And so they've done a great job at preserving some of that legacy of before it was a Marine Corps base.
Yeah, that ranch house is beautiful. I have driven by. I do know where that is, and I have driven by it, and it is really neat. I mean, I love history, and it is really neat to go on there and realize that amidst the workings of everyday military life, I mean, because you can definitely hear ordnance exploding almost all the time. There's like this old, ranch house that is tied to the startup of California. So it's fascinating to me.
I lived in Southern California for 20 years, and I definitely, it was very common to make that drive from San Diego to Orange County or LA. And I have to say, I really took Camp Pendleton for granted. It was always just kind of that base that you drive by from that long road from San Diego to Orange County, and it's just there. And then occasionally you can like pull over and like, there's like that one place where you could pull over and see like a scenic view for a little bit. But I definitely took that for granted. And I'm really excited to take a look at this book to really see what is inside of Camp Pendleton. I think it's just going to give me a deeper appreciation of what I had been driving by most, for a good 2/3 of my life. And I do appreciate you mentioning that it's a collaborative effort, kind of a team effort. It was a team effort to make this possible. And in your book, in the description, it mentions that there are more than 150 full color images and beautifully designed graphic illustrations depicting Camp Pendleton Marines' involvement in combat operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I'm curious, of amongst the 150 full color images, Amy, is there one that you particularly like that you think is worth our readers, our listeners taking a look at?
Wow, there's so many. What I'm most proud of, though, is the graphic designs that were created by a Marine veteran named Daniel Zimmerman of Devil Dog Graphics. And he created these 2-page spreads that are just so beautiful. And they really depict what I was after. And so that collaboration effort is what people really love to just, review and look over. But I'll mention that Camp Pendleton is special to me, too, because when I was first in the Marine Corps as a young Lance Corporal, Marine combat correspondent, I was stationed at Camp Pendleton. And so that's my connection going back 20 some years. And I just really felt that it was sort of home away from home for me. And so coming back here now as kind of all grown up and as an adult working as a civilian on Camp Pendleton, it really just is a place that I have such fond memories of deploying to and from. And so watching through the years of just the community, the surrounding community around Camp Pendleton is second to none. Oceanside, Dana Point, Vista, Fallbrook, these communities have stayed with these Marines and really welcomed them into their homes all throughout the year. And I know your listeners at home can't see, but here just some of those two pages with maps. There's detailed information about the legacy of these memorials. And so being able to have contributors put their words together and showing people, we've got an entry from a Navy Cross recipient, an entry from Colonel Greg Martin, who was the CEO of Warrior Foundation, Warrior Station in San Diego. The foreword was written by Lieutenant General Larry Nicholson. And so it's just really a well done book with many entries and a really just a lot of work went into it. But I know that anyone who is stationed at Camp Pendleton will probably love to see what's inside. And sort of like a 20-year cruise book, if for folks who know what that is, because it's just a compilation of photos and stories of the past 20 years with a lot of ups and downs, an emotional roller coaster with those constant deployments. And our Marines, through the generations, through those 20 years, have just cycled through knowing they're going to either go to Iraq or Afghanistan or go on a deployment. But the fact that they still join, knowing the risks and knowing what's at stake is something that we as Americans can be very proud that we are still having young people join our military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, despite the risks that are associated with that and the long deployments and the separations and the danger that is kind of lurking around every corner, whether it's just being on ship is dangerous or going out in the field can be dangerous. And so we appreciate that service and make sure we always thank our veterans too for those who've already served.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought I'd ask you, Amy, considering how you have served for decades, what was your original reason for joining?
Well, I went to an all-girls Catholic school, high school, but my grandparents had served in World War II. And so my grandfather was a Marine, my grandmother was an Army nurse, and they met on the island of Guam during World War II. And then war was over, they came home, got married. But I'd always heard of their stories of service and the camaraderie and the esprit de corps. And I thought, I really want to be a part of that. And growing up near San Francisco, I can tell you that those fleet weeks really make an impact on kids, that's what I remember most is those fleet weeks, those flyovers, the Blue Angels, the Marines and sailors walking around San Francisco. And I was just so attracted to that. So I joke sometimes I went to an all-girls Catholic school, wore a uniform, went to school, did what the nuns told me to do. The military is not much that different. So you wear a uniform and you go and you do what the NCOs tell you to do. And so it's just that natural progression. But I guarantee that no one saw that coming. And my high school, my family, they just thought it was crazy that I wouldn't make it, that I wasn't suited well for military life, and which is even more of a kick. And I said, well, watch me then. I'll do it and I will stick it out. And sure enough, here I am 30 years later. It'll be 30 years in February that since I stepped on what they call the yellow footprints for a Marine. When you go to boot camp, you step on these yellow footprints and you wait for the drill instructors to come start yelling at you. So I'm very proud to continue serving. And, it was just that draw to patriotism really through my family that inspired that. And after Desert Storm is really when I said, I want to do that. I want to serve my country. And today kids, they have all options for them, but for those who choose to serve, it's not because they don't have other things to do, but it's a life, a noble life, a noble cause. It's hard work. And I wouldn't have traded it for anything. I wouldn't have no regrets. And hopefully we can show, especially other, younger girls and women, that serving is not scary. It's not out of the realm, and serving in a leadership position. Certainly just rolling with the punches and keep going and knowing in your heart that that's the calling. It's more of a calling, really, as you guys know both all too well. It's a calling for those people who join and want to protect and defend our country.
Yeah, I'm hearing you talk and I completely agree with you. Like even someone such as myself, who's a Gold Star family member now, having been married to a veteran spouse 20 years later who is still very much involved in the military community, I get it. And I get why, even with everything that comes with the military life, the draw of doing something for the greater good, the nobility of it, like you said, there's nothing like it. And also the camaraderie and the understanding that comes with that. I mean, it's very rare to find that type of collaborative feeling anywhere else, but I think in the military, even as someone who is a civilian now, hosting this show, because I'm so drawn to the community till this day. Jenny Lynn, I'm sure you have some thoughts. I want to check in with you.
Well, one, I'm really glad Fleet Week works. As a public affairs officer spouse, we have spent many an hour at a Fleet Week. It's good to know that is excellent for recruitment. So what made you go from active duty to reserves? Like, why stay longer? Why continue to serve and try and balance? We have several friends who are reservists, and listening to their stories of balancing the civilian and military world is fascinating to me because as a military spouse, I feel like I am the bridge between those worlds all the time. I am a civilian who also has a military ID card and I can go on base. But our reserve friends, when I hear how, they're, C-suite level folks at these companies, and then they get called up to reserve duty and all of a sudden they're back on base trying to do that and balance both. Like, what's that look like? And what was the draw to go from active duty to reserve and try to balance those things?
Well, for me, I served 8 years of active duty, my initial 2 enlistments, really. And, they say at that 8-year mark is kind of either your jumping off point or you're going to stay in. And so I had a decision to make that back in those days, and this was 2000, where they didn't really have an online college opportunities. You had to take college classes the traditional way during the week and during the day. And so my pull to return to college and finish what I had started before I joined the Marines. So I really felt like, but I didn't want to leave the Marine Corps. I was still loving the lifestyle and my friends and the opportunities. So I stayed in the reserves while I worked my way through college, my undergraduate degree, and found it to be different than active duty, but with so many benefits and so many great opportunities to kind of cherry pick the assignments and still kind of have a hand in it. And then when 9/11 happened, I knew I was going to be deployed and definitely felt a calling to be available to deploy and serve. And sure enough, I got mobilized and deployed to Afghanistan in those early days in 2002. And so it was just like, well, I'm too far deep now. I can't leave, So I stayed in the Marines for a total of almost 18 years with active and deployed. So I got mobilized 4 times while I was in the Marines in the reserve. But I had ended up finishing my bachelor's degree, finishing my master's degree, using my GI Bill. But I couldn't have done it really if I wasn't in the reserves because it was like the best part-time job really to sustain not only the income, but access to the commissary and the gym and the lifestyle. And so, but I was always willing to go on, special assignments and deployments and help my unit with writing stories and things that they needed for public affairs wise. So that was the draw. And then the Navy opportunity came as a direct commission program where they bring in people who are either prior service or they are office, professionals working in the industry and bring them in to create just an amazing cohort of public affairs officers, especially that are working in these high level jobs with very high profile positions in government and media and industry. And so being a part of that is just a really unique and special opportunity. It's sort of a built-in way to network, and I've had nothing but great opportunities, assignments offered to me. So why not continue to serve where I can? And so that's kind of where it has led me over the past 30 years to stay in the reserves. And I love it because I can also recruit now too. I get oftentimes asked, well, how do you like it? Or how can I join? And so it's very competitive. I wouldn't want to be competing right now, entering, because the competition and the level of proficiency with these candidates and applicants is so strong. Really, top people want to serve. Like they're making big money, 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever, but they still want to continue serving our nation. And that speaks a great deal about the prestige and the honor that comes with wearing a uniform.
Yeah, I love hearing that because when we were talking in the pre-interview, one of the topics we wanted to discuss was the military having a top talent issue. So it sounds to me that things are turning around, or at least in your what do you think in your observation?
Well, I do think in those really competitive programs like direct commission officer or as a way to come into the military, there's different programs to come in through college or after. But a new report just came out that enlistees are having a hard time sort of recruiting these eligible candidates. And so we always want to raise the bar of who we can bring in or who's really interested in these programs, because They said that only nearly 25% are even eligible of those who really wants to serve. And so we want to attract these top talent of, young Americans who can go to college or do anything they want. But we definitely want, and I think that it's all up to every single person in uniform to share their story that will inspire the next generation and say, I want to be like that person, instead of just taking our bottom rung of people who either don't want to go to college and don't want to work. Sometimes has been the model of, okay, you can either go to jail or go in the military. And like, well, then what does that do for me? Like, why are you giving me a bunch of like delinquents, to join the military? And that's not what the military is about. We need competent, professional, dedicated, patriotic people willing to learn and willing to serve. And so attracting that top talent requires not just the recruiting commands, but it requires everyone to tell their stories. And that's where veterans come in, is if veterans can tell their success stories about how they're excelling in entrepreneurship or landing great jobs and really thriving in their life after the military, that in of itself is one of the top recruiting aids to help showcase all the great work that veterans are doing. And
I think like the general like goodwill and good press of veterans is really to your advantage. I want to express why I really love that you described this. And before I do, let me go ahead and give a quick shout out to our show sponsor, US Vet Wealth. If you've been following along in the recent episodes, US Vet Wealth is now rolling out with a free online community called the US Vet Wealth Insiders Portal. And it's essentially for military retirees who are looking for a trusted alternative resource for career progression tips, as well as financial solutions for you and your family. You can actually join this for free today. All you have to do is visit usvetwealth.com. That's USVETWEALTH.com. I'm mentioning this because we do have a particular section in the US Vet Wealth Insiders Portal called the Military Retirement Blueprint. Again, I want to mention that this is all free. And this is really an online portal we are actively building out where we help our military retirees analyze, design, and qualify for alternative career and financial strategies. This particular part of our Insiders Portal has curated courses, webinars, and education, all for free, once again, made for military retirees. You can get a well-rounded approach to your military retirement by studying the best options for you and your family in the government and the private sectors. So a little sneak peek into what you can find here at US Vet Wealth's Insiders Portal for the section, the Military Retirement Blueprint. We offer free courses and webinars. Some of the most requested as of right now are the following: the survivor benefit decision, answering the question, what do I do with my thrift savings plan? Understanding the difference between traditional financial advisors versus robo-advising. How do you privatize your pension, which is something that US Vet Wealth takes a lot of pride in helping our military retirees with, and much, much more. So if you are interested in getting free access to this alternative education made by veterans and military connected people such as myself for the military retiree, the career military family, and the seasoned spouse, go ahead and check it out now at our website, usvetwealth.com. That's USVETWEALTH.com. And I really love that you described this because I think about my own personal experience, like growing up in a military town like San Diego, a lot of my friends being military kids. And unfortunately, a lot of them joined for the economic opportunities because they were college dropouts, or they couldn't hold a job, or they didn't want to hold a job, or they were, still living with their parents in their 20s, young 20s. And the parents are like, hey, you got to do something with your life. And so that was sort of the impression I was coming from is, the military is the fallback to the fallback. Like if you can't make it to if you can't make it to a certain college, then you're joining the military. But it was really until I met my husband, who is a West Point grad and joined for that. He joined for the altruistic side of the military, for the greater good of America in a sense. And to be able to see it in that perspective, we were actually having this conversation recently because we're talking about wanting to have kids and stuff. We're like, you know what? I think at the bare minimum, we should encourage our kids to serve at least 4 years and, join some kind of academy because there is so much benefit to, and I'm saying this as a Gold Star family member, like I would say if I didn't have the traumatic experience that I had, I think I would have joined. I think I would have served for a couple of years just because of all the benefits that come with it. Of course, not just the military benefits, but again, that goodwill of the community, people perceiving you as, oh, you're a veteran, let us help you, let us, there's a ton of resources for veterans. So I do appreciate you kind of elaborating more on that perspective.
Well, it's fascinating. You and Scott were just talking about the academies. Matthew and I had a very similar conversation the other night. In fact, he's called up a friend of ours at the Naval Academy to see if they do summer tours for kids, because he's like, I want to start laying that groundwork now.
Yeah.
And, it's fascinating as somebody who grew up in a military area, albeit a little further inland than Norfolk or Virginia Beach. And, I've said this before, like the Navy was always that thing over there in Norfolk and Virginia Beach that as someone who grew up in Hampton Roads knew about, but it didn't affect my day-to-day life. And so, I didn't grow up in this community where everybody served. I mean, we had one person that I can recall in my high school whose dad was in the Navy, and what's fascinating about people joining in retention now is that it is mostly military kids they're the largest group of people joining the service, or the people that grew up this way. Yeah. But it's fascinating to me as a military spouse who grew up in a military area that it was never a track I considered, like not even a little bit. It just never crossed my mind that was a thing. Now, people from my high school went to different service academies or like Virginia Military Institute, and then I went to a school with a Corps of cadets and have some friends who are now in the Navy that served in the Corps. But it like never clicked with me. But to be a mom of like military kids growing up in this, and to hear them say it's funny with like each job my husband has, they change like what they're going to do in the military, like based on like where he is, but to hear them think that like that's an option for them. I mean, of course, right now at 11 and 12, it's Major League Baseball player or United States Navy. So, one may end up working out better than the other. But I love, I agree with Amy. I do think that we have an opportunity as either veterans or military family members to tell the stories and tell them well. I think for me personally, it is finding that line between the hard and the good and being truthful about both, because I would never want to present this lifestyle in a way that intentionally deterred or intentionally like misled people from joining. But I feel there is such benefit from being part of this community if all you ever get out of it is community. And there's 10,000 other things you can get out of it. But the community for me is where it lands. And so, I do hope that the work we do on this show and the work Amy does as a, PAO and military journalist gets the word out about, how great it is to be a part of this community.
That's so true. And I'll mention, I was in the first category you mentioned. I was 22 when I joined. I was sort of struggling through college and working, but in my heart, I knew that I really wanted to be in the military. My parents discouraged it. That's why I was like, didn't go right when I was 18. So I said, before I get too much older, I am going to do this. And so, there's and every across the strata, either joining when you're late because you're not really sure what you want to do, or going to an academy, and everyone in between. So you can make it if with hard work, you can achieve whatever. So you can completely stratify the whole spectrum for those people who are, I want to say like late bloomers like me, who didn't really have the means to go to college. And so that's what's wonderful about the military. There are pathways for people to enlist and move along the rank structure. And so all it really requires is, that you give your best effort and you take advantage of opportunities for people to, join, and that patriotism and believing in that right now, our nation needs an all hands on deck to try to solve some of our most complicated challenges and problems. And I was coming up in the 80s where it was like post Vietnam. So being in the military was not very popular, or there were no resources. And so, I love to have seen how it's been completely transformed. And so there's the thank yous and the honor to the veterans. And so I just love to be able to see that for our new veterans that people do appreciate their work. And so as a country, we've really shifted colors on that and done a 180. And so it's great to be a part of that, but to be the one saying thank you to our veterans too, as being able to honor them so that we can make sure that the next generation knows that they're going to be appreciated. And I think that's kind of what people are looking for nowadays, if they're able to serve and of course their families too. It comes with the territory that it's not just the service member. As you both know, you get the family package and it's part of the lifestyle, and that takes a big commitment, not just on the service member's part, but the entire family.
Yeah. One more thing I want to add, since we're doing like a recruiting commercial here, is
you're welcome, DOD.
Yeah. I was actually talking about this with Scott, my husband, and we are saying the military is one of the longest institutions in America where you can still climb a corporate ladder.
Yes.
And so that's something to keep in mind. And, considering you were talking about how you started when you were 22, Amy, I know Matthew Jenny started a little later himself. And
he was old.
Yeah. Yeah. And I recently, one of my good friends that I recently caught up with, her husband started when he was 28. So I do know that there is a cap, but, for the most part, to know that there is a system in place on how to climb the corporate ladder in the military it's there. The system is there. And so anyway, if you're interested, go visit. No,
no, it is funny you bring that up, Jen, because I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking I am at a point personally as a military spouse where for the first time really in my military spouse life, I am able to have a career. And what does that look like? And I have really started turning that question over and there are some jobs available to me that they're great jobs, but you're always going to be whatever that thing is. There is no moving up. And I think, being able to walk alongside Matthew in his career. And I mean, he's a Mustang. He transferred from enlisted to officer. I've seen at every step, I met him when he was Airman Stroop, and now he's, he's BAO, so, I've walked that journey with him. And so to look at it for myself and go, upward tenure is something that, growing up, I really aspired to. What does that look like now that I get to have a career? And I do have that military mindset of I would like to grow and change and move up and have more leadership opportunity. And it's really set the tone for me looking forward to my next, personal endeavor of what that looks like. But it's such a great structure. And it is one of those places that still remains is hard work and effort do pay off and do bring more leadership opportunities and, growth. And I think it's fascinating to me that you can have the same title, and I don't mean rank, but public affairs officer, and you can work with, Matthew has worked across every single organization within the Navy aside from submarines. So he's touched every, air and SWO and all the things, too many Navy acronyms there for our non-Navy listeners, but, and yet he's always been a public affairs officer, but his job has changed and he's gotten to do new and different things. And I find that so fascinating on the civilian side. Sometimes that's hard to find. And Jen, I know you've mentioned multiple times, you're an entrepreneur because you were oh my God, I can't stay in a regular job. This lifestyle really affected how you perceived work. And for me, I know it's made a difference in such a good way because I know now the value I bring to the table and that moving up thing is important to me.
Yeah. Indeed, I noticed this. So I got married a little bit later in life. I was 40 when I got married, and I didn't really know the challenges that military spouses had because I really wasn't one and I wasn't in tune with it. But my husband as well, we moved to Guam for my civilian job, but finding a balance for him too. So for women who want to marry someone who might be a higher earner, and there's so many more dynamics to it. So recruiting women into the military and serving, so long as their spouse is going to be willing to move along with them. And it can be very hard and disruptive to marriage when the spouse can't work or does only for 3 years and, moving on. And so it really takes a special person to forsake their own career progression in order to follow and support that military member. And so holding down the fort is, kind of that ancillary job for the spouse of the military member. And for someone who wants to have a career and has the opportunities, that decision point comes at a certain point, like, do you want to stay in or get out? Because I don't want to keep moving. And so I saw that on Guam a lot, is that service members didn't want to move to Guam because the spouses couldn't work. And so then we lost a lot of, especially the submarine trained folks there, is because tours on Guam were inevitable. And then the spouses didn't want to go and sit on an island where they couldn't work and progress in their own careers. And so it really was eye-opening. And some of these challenges that leadership maybe doesn't know about because their spouses didn't work and didn't need to work or chose not to work. And so some of the things that we all know to be true and relates to retention. And so trying to highlight those and find solutions, whether it's a job they can work from home now or take with them wherever they go, or entrepreneurship is such a great way. It kind of flattens the curve and the difficultness of transport jobs when you have to move around.
Yeah, I have a friend who runs this organization that helps military spouses find remote employment. And before the pandemic, it was a really difficult task. She had to find the right companies to partner with and everything. But then once we were in quarantine, once we had stay-at-home orders, essentially, all of a sudden the remote work exploded. And I know, Jenny Lynn, when you first started working your job, you had no idea that you were going to be working as an outreach coordinator virtually for essentially the entirety of your career so far.
All of it. Every single day of outreach I've done has been remote. Yeah, because California was closed down for so long.
Yeah.
It's great to see how the shift in what people value and that it can be done and trying to make that work. I think it really moved the needle in terms of trying to find remote work, especially for spouses who are moving around. And because if, say the spouse isn't happy, no one's happy, and the service member will leave, and we don't want that. And so it comes with a unit, it's a family unit that we, is so important and critical to readiness. And anything we can always do to help with improve that readiness so we can retain the best top talent and make it a family effort is so important.
Absolutely. So in addition to highlighting the importance of putting military families first and as a way to increase and maintain service member retention, I wanted to touch upon more about your experience, Amy, as a woman in the service, because here I am referring back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe because that's where my headspace is right now. A couple years ago, they recently released the movie Captain Marvel, and it was like such a big deal because it was like the first like female veteran that is in the Marvel universe. However, you have been serving as a female service member for the last 30 years. And so I know that you have seen all sorts of things in the military. I imagine you had been in many spaces where maybe you were like the only woman. But I know that a lot has changed. And from our conversation in your pre-interview, you're very optimistic about the opportunities for women in the military today.
Well, I can tell you that when I attended the Joint Women's Leadership Symposium a couple weeks ago in Norfolk, Virginia, I was so blown away there was about 900, almost 1,000 women in uniform. And it just made my heart soar because being able to see all those women come together from across the country and around the world, actually, we had women there from all over bases and stations as far away as Germany and Hawaii and Guam, so that they would come there to learn, be mentored, mentor others, and share experiences so we can thrive in this environment. And it's not easy. The military is really not meant for, I want to say, it's a machine that's not meant for women and lifestyle per se. So there's always an uphill challenge, and women have been serving patiently and quietly and diligently and successfully for so many years. I mentioned my grandmother was an Army nurse in World War II and serving, caring for those wounded on the battlefield in Guam and Saipan. And some of the stories that stayed with her and that shaped her life really shaped my life. And that was what inspired me to join. But in the reality of today's world is that women serving in the military still face uphill challenges because of policy or practice or just that legacy mindset that women don't belong in the military or you're not good enough or you shouldn't be here. And so I've heard it all and I've experienced it all. And so being able to just shrug it off and, really try to remember the calling and, having that opportunity to be a public affairs or enlisted combat correspondent. And the thing that I always tried to do was to shaping these stories and tell the good news about our military always gave me hope. And if I could make someone's day, that's what I was out to do. And really to always remember, share the courage it takes to serve, whether man or woman, the courage it takes to put on a uniform, kit up, step off, go in harm's way was really a calling for me and being able to tell those stories. I can tell you there's been stories where I've covered a story about a Marine doing something on the job and back in the old newspaper days, and they would send the newspaper clipping back to their home to mom. Mom would have that article posted on the refrigerator for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And they would tell me, my mom still has that article that you did about me. And so I was like, if I could make moms and dads proud by writing a story and taking a photo of a Marine or soldier, sailor, airman, then that's my calling and that's my job, regardless of what other people are saying or doing about being in the military, because I know that those matter. And I think there's been a huge shift in mindset, especially in the last 10 years or so, or at least since Iraq and Afghanistan, where women were being killed. And so I'll tell you that when Major Megan McClung was killed in combat in December 2006 in Iraq, that really awakened the reality that women are prepared and know the risk when they go into combat zones. And that if she's willing to do that, then isn't that enough to be accepted into the club, the secret handshake, and be willing to serve? And so it has. And I can tell you that even as recent as last year, it's been almost a year now, where 2 female Marines were killed in Afghanistan at the airport, the Kabul International Airport. And so while as tragic as male Marines dying, but we've come to accept that as America said, well, we're not ready for women to die in combat. But I think now we've really accepted that if they're willing to kit up and step off and go on ships, serve as aircraft pilots, shouldn't that be enough and be proof enough that we're willing to take that risk? And so by that alone, I think that has shifted some mindsets from that old legacy mindset that you don't belong here. So I've seen great changes and I'm so hopeful. There's women coming up behind us. My main mission in life is to open doors, create opportunities for women in the military, veterans who want to become authors or step into, get a master's degree and work in media or journalism and create those connections for people.
That's awesome. It's fascinating. You talk about this legacy mindset. I am now on my second World War II era historical fiction book of the summer, both about females in combat during World War II in Russia. And the current book I'm reading, it's fascinating because this Russian female sniper, and it's based on real people. It is historical fiction, so obviously some of the things are made up, but most of it is really based on things that actually happened. And she comes to America on a goodwill tour in hopes of America giving aid and putting in another front in Eastern Europe to deter the Germans during World War II. And the way that it is written about how the American press and the American Washington, D.C. ladies welcomed, and I put that in air quotes for our listeners who can't see my fingers, welcomed her, is fascinating. And it just speaks so much to the legacy we've had here in the United States is that women stay home and support. And that is our legacy as a military family. We stay home and support. We're holding down the fort at home, those things. And in reading this book, it's because most of it is from inside the mind of the female sniper. And she's looking at us, like the Americans, going, why don't they get it? Like, and there's this scene I just read last night where she'd gone to like this shooting club, and it was this old boys club, and they gave her a rifle, and like she set up against these 10 men in this rifle club and beat every one of them, 10 bullseyes in 3 minutes. But it wasn't until she proved that she could do it that like she was welcomed as a soldier into that group. She'd been this very othered, oh, look at her. She's so cute in her dress uniform, like over here trying to tell us about war. And it's been fascinating to read and then to think about, like, I know so many women in the military and so many that have been the first at whatever they do. And one of my favorites, her like retirement speech was, it's great that I was the first XYZ. I'd really like for there not to be any more first. And I just thought, man, that's really awesome. And yet, just the other day, the first Blue Angel pilot, the first female Blue Angel pilot. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? We hadn't had that yet? Like, there's still a part of me even that I'm like, oh, we've made such strides. And also, wow, like we're still having the first. So, I'm with you. I've seen a lot of change in the 15 years I've been married into this lifestyle. And I hope, to continue to see change. And I hope, we have an episode, that came out, I don't know what, season 3, Jen, with Misty Flynn, who's Master Chief. She is a friend of mine, and we had a very candid conversation about the relationship between female spouses and female service members, because that's part of what helps change this too. And I think that's a conversation worth revisiting for folks that haven't listened to it. It's, something that's going to help move the needle forward and make, Department of Defense the ground for which we show everyone else the advances that can be made, that we can all be a very diverse and inclusive culture.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Especially with, the spouses and women in service. There's been this sort of two groups that never intersected. And I've always tried, or I've always wanted to be friends with spouses because I didn't really have a lot of female friends in the network wherever I was stationed. And so kind of breaking into that group or being as a friendly, is hard, but I think it takes some work on both ends as well to make a good, solid unit come together where people feel comfortable with that. But, I want to tell you, so in the development of female engagement teams, a lot of people maybe don't know that story where in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we needed women to do searching of other women, of the Iraqi women and Afghan women, and kind of being able to get together with them on patrol. Like, so we gathered some women Marines to go on patrol with the Marines, male Marines, to talk to the women, because usually the women know where the bad guys are. The women know where the things are. And so they developed this concept of female engagement teams, which led to this cultural support teams, where now in special forces, this is like a standard. And so the biggest things we've learned about integrating women into our combat operations and our overall operations while we're out there is that women play a key role in combat, whether it's engaging with other women. And a good friend of mine, Julia Watson, a Marine Master Sergeant, she gave a TED Talk speech about why women in war matter. And so I don't think there's going backwards, right? So the genie's out of the bottle. We can't put that back in. And so I think we're going to see more to come. And as women reach higher ranks and more policy makers out there at that highest levels, we're going to see more awareness and moving the needle to help make it a place where women can serve and serve successfully, where they don't need to punch out after 10 years and get discouraged or distracted. And if they can also build some tools to roll with the punches and put things in perspective, definitely see a longer longevity of careers for women. They can just stick it out long enough to get to reach those ranks, which we've seen now, especially in the Navy and the Army. It's wonderful. And the Air Force too, to see some of these women reach 3-star, 4-star, or, senior enlisted leaders like in the Air Force. And it's just really great to see.
Yeah, it's very inspiring. I think about, the work that I do with Scott and our team, and we primarily talk to like male veterans, which, it is what it is, but it is always very exciting when we're able to talk to a female veteran. It's just very refreshing and makes me very optimistic for the military. Real quick, just a shout out to Misty Flynn. She was episode 78, which is, wow, that was like well over a year ago. It was February 2021. Yeah. But that one was titled Encouraging Female Service Members and Military Spouses to Connect on Shared Challenges with Misty Flynn. So shout out to Misty for that. And I'm curious, Amy, if you had a mantra on what to tell yourself if ever you were kind of faced with being othered, or is it kind of like you've just kind of gotten this like second nature habit to brush it off now? I'm curious if you have any strategies for that, or like I said, if you just kind of brush it off.
Well, framing is everything, and how to succeed in the military lifestyle. And there's been so many ups and downs and second guessing. And did I do the right thing? And I want to push the needle. I want to do more. I want to get this done. And being a doer, I do have one quote that I often refer to is risking is always better than regretting. And so taking some risks to push the envelope, as they say, or take a risk because you do not want to live with regret and saying, I wished I could have, I should have done this. What if it had turned out differently? So I've always been a risk taker, and it's always paid off. And, one thing in the military, they say, don't ever volunteer for anything. But I've done the exact opposite. I volunteer for everything. And usually it's something really cool, or I can carve out my own path and it ends up being really fun or an exciting opportunity. And so just taking those risks in order to get the reward. I always just recommend people take a chance, believe in yourself, most importantly, and bet on yourself 100% of the time. So risking is always better than regretting. No regrets in life, right?
Yeah, I love that. It's better to say, whoops, than, oh, I wish, right? It's like, one of my favorite phrases for myself is I always like to say, well, so far, so good. Like that's usually what I go with. And I just kind of focus on failing forward and doing things trial and error and like just making mistakes and seeing how that could be really fruitful. And so I love that for you. It's like, hey, any moment where it's risky, you lean into it because like you mentioned, it almost always is gratifying at the end and rewarding at the end. Jenny Lynn, just curious if you had any thoughts.
Well, as we've discussed many times, I'm pretty risk averse, so I'm not sure. I err on the side of caution, though I do love the reframe of I'd rather, risk than regret. That's a great reframe for me and for people like me who are like, I don't know about that. I would actually rather step out and do the thing than wonder how it would have gone or if it would have gone. So thanks for that, Amy.
Well, with the taking a risk on, say, the book, putting together this book, I'm not an author. I barely even read books. I'm not necessarily a reader. So me putting together a book was the furthest thing from my mind. But I said, what if no one buys it? And that was a very good possibility. No one's going to want to buy this. That's the first thing to convince myself not to do this thing, not to put together this book. But so what if people actually wanted to see this and wanted to buy it and took comfort and some reassurance from it. And so that's what really pulled me into it. And so I took a risk, and luckily people have been very appreciative and supportive of it. And so for that, I'm thankful. And so I won't live with the, well, I could have, would have, should have, or I wished I would have. And so taking that risk and taking that leap of faith, I just knew that somebody could gain comfort and appreciate it. And so I encourage people out there, if you're thinking about doing something, if you're kind of want to do a thing, take a risk and pursue it, take action. And because this is all we've got right here in life. So don't live with the regret. And if you can change someone's day by doing something, follow your heart, really listen to your heart. What is it telling you to do? And take that action.
Well, Amy, thank you. Thank you for everything that you do for our military community. You are an award-winning military journalist for a reason. And why don't you let our listeners know if they want to learn more about the book, Heroes Live Here, or they want to reach out to you directly, how can they do that?
Well, certainly. I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, Twitter. But if people want to learn more about the book called Heroes Live Here, they can go to the website, heroeslivehere.com. You can follow our Instagram page and our Facebook page, Heroes Live Here. And I'd just love to connect with other people. If there's people out there who might want to learn more about the book business or get connected with veteran authors or learn some things, just follow along and see how I'm doing my media or engagements. And I'm doing a lot of veteran talks too. I've been invited to come and speak to veterans groups, which I'm always happy to do, talk about this process and sort of the research that went involved with Camp Pendleton, especially in San Diego area. I'm more than happy to share that, but love to connect with anyone out there. Appreciate the opportunity. It's been so great to connect with you ladies today and holding down the fort. It's wonderful. Really makes my heart sing knowing that we've got ladies out there like you who are really driving the conversation, keeping the conversation going with these important topics. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. You are incredible, inspirational, aspirational as well, I think. And I think this just creates, I hope that in sharing your story and you showing up as you are, our listeners will just have one more amazing example as to why, not that this is a recruiting ad in any way, but why it is a great opportunity to join the military and serve for our country. Thank you, Amy, so much for your time. And Jenny Lynn, thank you for co-hosting with me as always. Thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you want to get a hold of Amy, we will have all of her contact information in the show notes, as well as her book, Heroes Live Here, and how you can get a hold of that yourself. We hope you got a lot out of this conversation, and we will chat with you in the next episode. Tune in next time. Hey, thanks again for joining us at Holding Down the Fort by U.S. Vet Wealth. Once again, I am your co-host, Jen Amos.
And I'm Jenny Lynn Stroop.
Thank you so much for listening to our show.
If you've gotten a lot out of our conversation today, be sure to leave us a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser.
Or you can leave us a kind LinkedIn recommendation on our LinkedIn profiles.
Learn more about Holding Down the Fort by visiting holdingdownthefortpodcast.com. And there you'll also be able to find us on social media and how to contact us directly.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Until next time.